Ever wonder how photographers spend $10,000 on gear and trips, yet still come home with photos that just don't connect? I fell into the same trap, pouring money into new lenses and dream locations, only to discover my images were not winning any awards or even turning heads. So in this video, I'm going to show you the eye-opening mindset shift and practical steps you need to finally create wildlife photos that move people, no matter your gear or budget. So when I first started wildlife photography, I thought that by saving enough money to go on more trips and getting better cameras and new lenses, the 500 f4, 600 f4, 400 2.8 would be the solution. And indeed, that's exactly what I did. I saved up enough money, and I would pick some of the most iconic places to go photograph wild animals, such as Yellowstone National Park, Masai Mara in Kenya, to places in Alaska to photograph bears, lots of those places. And those trips are very expensive, from $8,000 to over $10,000. And with cameras and lenses, sometimes I rent new lenses, and also the plane tickets, and then you always would get some new external hard drives and new clothes, and so it adds up. I remember one time I thought I was smart enough. Instead of going to join a group tour, I asked my friend to introduce me to some of the guides and drivers in Africa, and I hired a private guide and a private driver, so I would have my own vehicle and going to the places with the most animals, most African wildlife, right? In Masai Mara would be the best way for me to get good photos. And that trip, because it's a private tour, is quite expensive with their own vehicle. So added up, I think for over a week is more than quite a few $1,000s, I should say. And guess what? When I got back, now that after I have judged so many years for photo contests, including the Nature Photographer of the Year and Share the View Bird Photographer of the Year, and those, looking back at those photos, I would have gotten 50,000 photos from that trip. We saw lots of animals, lions, leopards, elephants, all kinds of animals, all kinds of amazing encounters, predators and prey, animals with their cubs. And I would think that those would be good, but when now with the eyes of a judge, I realized that none of these photos would even work. Those photos are non-photos to me, because it just wouldn't have any chance to to be able to have anybody to be interested to buy or win any awards or get any publications. And the funny thing was, I still remember one year after a very expensive winter trip to Yellowstone National Park in the winter. That trip, I think after all the expense, it was definitely over $10,000. And I got, again, 30,000 photos. And at the end of the trip, before I got back to Los Angeles, where I live, I spent 2 days in Seattle, because at the time, near Damon Point, Seattle, there was some sighting of the rare snowy owl eruption. So I went there, and for those 2 days, I was able to photograph some snowy owls, and so that trip was literally free, because I was just on my way back home. I just stopped by Seattle, and instead of following all the all the pros, all my teachers teaching, I tried something very new, something that I thought it might be interesting to try. So instead of getting those in the perfect light, 2000 of a second and those, I tried something very weird. I was using a shutter speed of 60th of a second, and I got a shot. And at the time, there were still, those websites like 500px where you post a photo, and if it's good, people will comment on it and stuff like that. And don't you like the sound of the little creek right here? Sorry, I got distracted. My attention issue. So I got back and I posted a lot of my photos from Yellowstone, and then I in 500px, and I heard crickets. People are not really responding to the photos, and it's oh God, I spent so much money and it didn't really work. But then when I post one of the snowy owl photo, it just went in a way viral. It has hundreds of not hundreds, over 1,000 likes, and people are commenting on it. And the same thing happens when I post more and more photos online. The photos that were coming from these iconic trips didn't get anywhere. I got the emotion of the animals perfectly, shot photos in 2000 of a second, and those. But most if not all of the time, the photos that actually got the most views, likes, and those were photos that were completely unexpected. And that's when I realized something. The thing is, I got completely confused. When we talk about we want to take photos that are full of emotion, it's actually not to capture the emotion of the animal. For example, a bear cub and the mothers love the interaction. That we thought that as long as we nail that shot with those sharp focus on that emotion, the photos would work. But actually, what I missed was that I've never thought about photos is a visual art, and for art to work, it has to connect with the viewers. So instead of capturing the emotion of the animal, actually I should evoke the emotion of the viewers, and that emotion requires a completely different set of skill. Instead of sharp lenses, new trips, encounters, and those, it really requires you to understand some of the elements of what triggers emotion in a photo. And that is why I spend a lot of time afterwards to really understand how human psychology works, how vision works, and what are the elements in the photo that really triggers emotion. And some of the things that I learned the most were actually from the paintings of Van Gogh, Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, and those. And after I learned about those, the whole thing changes for me. My whole photography changed. So a lot of us thought that by going to those trips, getting these amazing encounters, all I need is just another trip. The thing is, basically we are getting the same kind of photos as everybody else. Right? So I would rather stay home and think about what kind of new shots I can get before I go to a location, instead of just keep buying new lenses, by going to new locations. And that really helps me a lot in photography. And so after I understand this, right, after I think about, for example, if I have an animal I want to photograph and this is the location, I would spend a lot of the time to think about what kind of photos I want to get, and are there any chances in that location that I can get those photos. For example, in terms of the light, the composition, the texture of the habitat, and those. And only until I have a clear concept of those photos I want to get, so I have a mission before I even go to those places. And then that's what changes. Instead of going to 10 trips and getting back one photo out of the 10 trips that can win an award or moves people, now when I go to a place, including some of my clients, some of my students too, when they go to a place, sometimes just one day of the trip that can generate, photos that, get publications, get awards, multiple awards, and those. And the reason is because we are no longer focusing on only capturing the emotion of the animal, but what we are looking at is to know what are those elements in front of us that can trigger the emotion of the viewers. And that way, I save not only one trip or 5 trips or 10 trips, but to save like almost 10 years. And some of my clients said the same thing. After they got back, they told me that, Tin Man, I feel like what I just learned saved me 10 years of my life, and that's why I want to share with you. So instead of just keep on booking on trips, I would rather think about spending more time to think about what kind of photos, what kind of elements your photos, what kind of elements can really trigger those emotions in the viewers, to make them cry, to make them laugh, and focus on that before you even spend time to go to another location that is very famous, very famous for lions, very famous for certain birds and those. Because at the end, right, as especially when there are more and more photographers these days who are taking up photography, the competition, even though we don't want to hear that, the competition is very tough. And in order to really create photos, in one of my videos I talk about what the judges, the editors are looking for. After I judge 100,000 photos, you guys should check out that video. And there are just so many elements, but the one thing that is so important is, instead of focusing on the emotion of the animal, capturing that, focus on how do you turn that emotion into a moment that triggers the emotion of the viewers. So hope that helps. And if you are interested to learn some of the basic elements of how to really take photos without making the biggest mistakes, definitely check out my BCS model in the video right here, and I'll talk to you guys soon.